Hey guys. Tonight, we're heading back to a time of rattling wheels, dry winds, and long quiet roads. A time when the journey mattered more than the destination, and every mile was earned through dust, sun, and sheer endurance. If you enjoy this kind of slow, immersive content, please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. And I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Leave a comment and let me know if you're winding down after a long day, or maybe you're halfway around the world and it's morning for you. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft hum, and let's drift back in time. The darkness before dawn wraps around you like a worn blanket as you wake in the narrow bunk of Murphy's Way Station. The air inside the small room is stale and warm, heavy with the lingering scent of yesterday's beans and the mustiness of old wool. Your body aches in that familiar way, the deep soreness that comes from too many days gripping leather reins and absorbing every jolt and bounce of the trail through your spine and shoulders. You lie still for a moment, listening. Outside, the world is hushed except for the distant lowing of cattle and the soft shuffle of horses in the corral. Somewhere a rooster clears its throat, preparing for the dawn call that's still an hour away. The wooden walls around you creak softly as the desert air begins to cool further, that brief respite before the sun returns to bake the earth once more. Your eyes adjust slowly to the dim interior. A sliver of starlight filters through the single small window, casting everything in shades of gray. The other bunk across from yours is empty. Henderson pulled out yesterday morning, heading south toward Tucson with a load of mining equipment and 3 passengers who looked like they'd never been west of St. Louis. You wonder if he made it to Willow Creek before the heat got too fierce. The floorboards are cold against your bare feet as you swing your legs over the side of the bunk. The chill runs up through your body, waking you fully. You reach for your clothes, draped over the single wooden chair in the corner. The fabric of your shirt is stiff with dried sweat and dust from yesterday's run, but it's clean enough. Out here, clean enough is usually the best you can hope for. You pull on your trousers, the heavy canvas material rough against your skin. These pants have seen better days. The knees are worn thin and there's a small tear near the right pocket that you keep meaning to mend, but somehow there's never time when you're not too tired to hold a needle steady. The suspenders are frayed where they cross your shoulders, but they still hold. Your boots wait beside the bunk, the leather scarred and dusty but still solid. You work your feet into them, feeling the familiar pinch at the heel where the right boot has never quite fit properly. The laces are new, replaced just last week when the old ones finally gave up after months of being tied and retied with increasingly gentle hands. You learned long ago that jerking at worn leather only makes it snap at the worst possible moment. The door handle is smooth and warm under your palm as you ease it open. The hinges give their usual soft protest, a whisper of metal against metal that seems loud in the pre-dawn quiet. You step outside onto the narrow porch that runs along the front of the way station, and the cool air hits your face like a gentle slap, clean and sharp after the stuffiness inside. Above you, the sky is a deep purple black, scattered with stars so bright and numerous they seem close enough to pluck. The Milky Way stretches across the heavens like a river of light, and for a moment you pause to look up at it. This is one of the compensations of the job, these quiet moments when the world feels vast and peaceful, when the isolation becomes solitude instead of loneliness. The corral is about 50 yards from the main building, a rough circle of split rails that contains your team and the extra horses. As you walk toward it, your boots crunch softly on the gravel and sand. The sound carries in the still air, and you hear one of the horses snort and shift. They know your footsteps, these animals. After months on the trail together, you've become familiar to each other in the way that only shared hardship can create. There are 6 horses in your regular team, plus 2 spares. Each one represents a small fortune, not just in the initial cost but in the feed, care, and replacement that keeping them healthy requires. You know each animal's personality, its strengths and weaknesses, the particular way it responds to your voice and hands on the reins. Thunder, the big bay gelding, is your lead horse. He's getting older now, maybe 12 years, and his muzzle is starting to show gray, but he has more sense about reading trail conditions than you do sometimes. He can feel a soft spot in the road through his hooves before you can see it, and he's saved the coach from more than one potential disaster by refusing to step where the ground wouldn't hold. Beside Thunder stands Molly, a sturdy brown mare with white markings on her legs. She's younger and still has some fire in her, but she's learned to work well with Thunder's steady leadership. Behind them, the other 4 horses wait patiently. Sam and Cisco, both buckskins with dark manes. Belle, a gray mare with a gentle disposition. And Jake, a chestnut with a white star on his forehead who tends to get nervous during thunderstorms but has never failed to pull his weight. You approach the corral slowly, letting them see you coming. Thunder lifts his head and regards you with those large, dark eyes that seem to hold more wisdom than most people you've met. You reach into your pocket for the handful of oats you saved from last night's feeding, holding them out on your flat palm. Thunder's lips are soft and ticklish against your skin as he takes the grain, and you run your hand along his neck, feeling the warmth of his body through the thick coat. The water trough needs filling, as it always does. You work the handle of the well pump, the metal cold and slightly sticky with overnight dew. The pump protests with a rusty squeal, then settles into a steady rhythm. Water gushes out in spurts, splashing into the wooden trough with a hollow sound that gradually deepens as the level rises. The horses move toward the water, but they're not desperate for it. You've trained them well about pacing themselves, about not drinking too much too fast when they're heated from work. While they drink, you walk around the corral, checking the fence rails by feel in the dim light. Everything seems solid enough, though one post near the gate is working loose and will need attention soon. You make a mental note to mention it to Murphy when he gets up. Maintaining these way stations is a constant battle against the elements and the simple passage of time. The eastern horizon is beginning to show the faintest hint of color now, a subtle lightening that's more felt than seen. Soon it will be time to start the day's preparations in earnest, but for now you allow yourself these few quiet minutes. You lean against the fence and listen to the horses breathing, to the soft sounds of their movement in the corral, to the vast silence of the desert beyond. A coyote calls somewhere in the distance, a lonely sound that echoes briefly before being swallowed by the emptiness. Another answers from a different direction, and then silence returns. These are the voices of the country you work in, the soundtrack of solitude that has become as familiar as your own heartbeat. The way station behind you is still dark except for a thin line of yellow light under Murphy's door. He'll be up soon, starting the coffee and checking his own preparations for the day. Murphy runs a good station, keeps decent food and clean water, maintains his equipment properly. Some of the stops along your route are less reliable, places where the coffee tastes like mud and the beans are more grit than food, but Murphy takes pride in his work. You turn back toward the horses and begin the morning inspection that has become second nature. You run your hands along their legs, feeling for heat or swelling that might indicate injury. You check their hooves, picking out small stones and examining the shoes for wear. You lift their feet one by one, and they stand patiently for this attention, long accustomed to the routine. Thunder's left rear shoe is working slightly loose. Not dangerous yet, but something to watch. You'll need to have it reset when you reach Millfield, assuming the blacksmith there is sober enough to work. The last time you came through, he was 3 days into a celebration of some kind and couldn't have shod a rocking horse. Belle has a small cut on her right foreleg, probably from a sharp stone yesterday. It's already starting to heal, but you make a note to keep an eye on it. The cut is clean and doesn't seem to be causing her any discomfort, but in this dusty country, even small wounds can turn problematic if they're not watched. The light is growing stronger now, painting the desert landscape in shades of purple and gold. The mountains to the west are still dark silhouettes against the sky, but the rolling hills to the east are beginning to show their true colors. The dusty greens of sage and mesquite, the pale yellow of dried grass, the red-brown of exposed earth. You walk back toward the way station, your boots leaving clear prints in the sandy soil. The air is still cool, but you can already sense the heat that's coming. By noon, the sun will be merciless, turning the interior of the stagecoach into an oven and making every mile feel like 3. But for now, the morning air is a gift, clean and soft against your skin. Murphy's door opens just as you reach the porch, and he emerges carrying a steaming cup of coffee. He's a man of about 50, grizzled and weathered by years of desert life, but his eyes are clear and his handshake is still firm. He nods to you without speaking, understanding that these early morning moments are not times for conversation. He hands you the cup, and you wrap your fingers around it gratefully. The coffee is strong and hot, with just a hint of the metallic taste that comes from being brewed in well water. It's not the best coffee you've ever had, but it's exactly what you need right now, the heat spreading through your body and the caffeine beginning its slow work of sharpening your awareness. You sip the coffee slowly, savoring both the warmth and the quiet. Murphy disappears back inside, and you can hear him moving around, starting his own morning routine. Soon there will be the smell of bacon frying and the sound of plates and utensils being arranged. The passengers are probably still asleep in their rooms, making the most of these last comfortable hours before facing another day of dust and jolting movement. The horizon to the east is now clearly lighter, and you can see the long line of the road stretching away toward your destination. Today's run will take you from Murphy's Station to Millfield, a distance of about 40 miles over terrain that varies from flat desert to rolling hills to one particularly challenging stretch where the road winds through a series of rocky canyons. If all goes well, you'll make the journey in 8 hours. If there are problems with weather, equipment, or the passengers, it could take much longer. You finish the coffee and set the cup down on the porch railing. Time to begin the real work of the day. You walk around to the back of the way station where the stagecoach waits under a simple lean-to shelter. Even in the growing light, it's an impressive piece of equipment. A heavy wooden body mounted on thick leather thoroughbraces that serve as springs, painted in faded red and gold with black trim. The driver's seat, called the box, sits high above the passenger compartment, giving you a commanding view of the road ahead. The coach has seen better days, like everything else out here. The paint is chipped and faded, the leather thoroughbraces are cracked and patched, and one of the door handles wobbles when you test it. But the basic structure is sound, the wheels are true, and the brake works smoothly. It's been your responsibility for 6 months now, and you've developed the same kind of relationship with it that you have with the horses. Respectful familiarity built on mutual dependence. You walk around the coach slowly, performing your daily inspection. The wheels get special attention, each one examined for loose spokes, worn bearings, or damage to the iron tires. A broken wheel in the middle of nowhere can turn a routine trip into a life-threatening situation, so you've learned to look carefully and trust nothing to chance. The front axle shows some wear where the kingpin passes through, but it's not serious yet. The rear thoroughbraces are holding well despite their age, though the leather is beginning to crack near the mounting points. The brake shoes are wearing thin but should last another few weeks. You make mental notes about each issue, adding them to the growing list of maintenance items that will need attention during the coach's next layover. Inside the passenger compartment, you check the seats and floor for damage or excessive wear. The upholstery is patched in several places, and the floorboards are scarred from years of boots and luggage, but everything is functional. The windows can be covered with leather curtains during bad weather, though most passengers prefer to leave them open for air circulation, even when it means eating dust for hours at a time. Your toolbox is secured under the driver's seat, containing the basic equipment needed for roadside repairs: spare pins and bolts, leather strips for emergency patches, a small hammer, pliers, and a selection of other tools chosen for their versatility rather than their specialization. Weight is always a concern on the Stagecoach, so every item must earn its place through usefulness. The mail compartment under the rear seat is locked, as always. The key hangs on a chain around your neck, never removed except when loading or unloading official correspondence. The responsibility of carrying the mail is one that you take seriously. These letters and packages represent the lifeline between isolated communities and the outside world, carrying news of births and deaths, business transactions, legal documents, and the thousand small communications that hold society together across vast distances. You harness the horses with practiced efficiency, each animal taking its accustomed position without guidance. The process of fitting 6 horses with proper harness is complex and time-consuming, but you've done it so many times that your hands seem to work independently of conscious thought. Each strap must be adjusted properly, each buckle secured, each connection point checked for wear or damage. Thunder and Molly take their positions as the lead pair, connected to the coach by the longest traces. Behind them, Sam and Cisco form the swing pair, and Belle and Jake make up the wheel pair, closest to the coach and bearing the most direct load. The whole assembly is a marvel of engineering, distributing the weight and pulling force across 6 animals in a way that allows them to move the heavy coach efficiently across difficult terrain. The sun is fully above the horizon now, painting the desert in warm golden light. The temperature is already beginning to rise, and you can feel the promise of heat on your face. You pull on your hat, a wide-brimmed affair that's seen better days but still provides essential protection from the sun. The leather hatband is stained with salt from months of absorbed sweat, and the crown is creased and shaped by countless handlings, but it fits your head perfectly and has become as much a part of you as your own skin. Your driving gloves are worn thin at the fingertips and palms, the leather soft and pliable from use. They provide just enough protection from the reins without interfering with your feel for the horses' mouths. Good hands are essential for a driver. The ability to communicate with 6 animals through leather straps and metal bits, to sense their mood and condition through the subtle tensions and relaxations that travel up the reins. Murphy emerges from the way station carrying a canvas bag that contains your lunch: bread, cheese, dried meat, and a small jar of water. It's not much, but it's enough to sustain you through the day's journey. You secure the bag under the driver's seat, making sure it won't bounce loose during the rough stretches of road that lie ahead. The passengers begin to emerge from their rooms, blinking in the bright morning light. There are 3 of them today: a middle-aged businessman heading to Millfield on some kind of commercial venture, a young woman traveling to meet her fiancé, and an older man who claims to be a journalist but looks more like a gambler. They move slowly, still stiff from yesterday's journey and probably not looking forward to another day of punishment. You help them load their luggage into the rear boot, making sure everything is secured properly. Loose items have a way of working themselves free during the journey, and you've learned that it's better to spend extra time with the rope now than to stop every few miles to retie shifting loads. The businessman has brought far too much baggage for a man traveling by stagecoach, but that's his problem. You arrange it as efficiently as possible and make sure it's tied down securely. The young woman looks pale and nervous, and you suspect she's never traveled by stagecoach before. You offer her a few words of advice about bracing herself during rough sections and keeping a kerchief ready for the dust, but mostly you let her discover for herself what the journey will demand. Experience is the only teacher that really works out here. The journalist asks several questions about the route and the timing, displaying the kind of curiosity that makes you slightly suspicious. Most legitimate travelers are more concerned with comfort and arrival time than with detailed information about roads and schedules. But he pays his fare in good coin and doesn't seem to be carrying anything dangerous, so you answer his questions politely and keep your reservations to yourself. You climb up to the driver's box, settling into the worn seat that has shaped itself to your body over months of use. The reins feel familiar in your hands, the leather warm and supple. You gather them carefully, making sure each pair is properly separated and positioned. With 6 horses, managing the reins requires constant attention and considerable skill. A mistake in handling can result in tangled traces, confused animals, and potentially dangerous situations. The brake lever is within easy reach of your right hand, a simple but crucial piece of equipment. The brake works by pressing wooden shoes against the rear wheels, providing the stopping power needed for steep descents and emergency situations. It requires considerable physical strength to operate effectively, and your right arm has developed the particular kind of muscle that comes from years of applying pressure to that lever. Murphy comes out to see you off, a traditional courtesy that marks the official beginning of the day's journey. He checks the harness one final time, running his experienced eye over the equipment with the thoroughness of a man who understands that small problems can become large disasters. Satisfied, he steps back and raises his hand in farewell. You release the brake and speak softly to the horses. Thunder's ears flick back to catch your voice, and he leans into his collar. The other horses follow his lead, and the coach begins to move forward with a creaking of leather and wood that will be the soundtrack for the next 8 hours. The passengers settle themselves as best they can, and another day's journey begins. The road away from Murphy's station is relatively smooth for the first few miles, winding through flat desert country dotted with mesquite and sage. The morning air is still cool enough to be pleasant, and the horses step out eagerly, glad to be moving after a night's rest. Their hooves raise small puffs of dust that drift away on the gentle breeze, and the coach wheels roll smoothly over the packed earth. You settle into the rhythm that will carry you through the day, your body finding the balance point that allows you to absorb the coach's movement without fighting it. Your feet are braced against the footboard, your back straight but flexible, your hands light on the reins. Every muscle must be alert but not tense, ready to respond to changes in the road or the horse's behavior without wasting energy on unnecessary effort. The sun climbs higher, and the temperature begins to rise noticeably. You can feel the heat starting to build on your shoulders and the back of your neck, despite the protection of your hat and shirt. By midday, the sun will be directly overhead, turning the driver's box into a furnace and making every breath feel like swallowing fire. But that's still hours away, and for now the morning warmth is almost pleasant. The horses are moving well, their stride even and coordinated. You can tell from their posture and the sound of their breathing that they're feeling good this morning, ready for the work ahead. Thunder sets the pace with his usual steady wisdom, neither pushing too hard nor allowing the team to fall into laziness. The other horses follow his lead, maintaining the kind of coordinated effort that makes a 6-horse team look almost like a single organism. The road begins to climb gradually as you leave the flat desert behind and enter the foothills that mark the beginning of more challenging terrain. The horses lean into their collars, and you can hear their breathing deepen slightly as they adjust to the increased effort. The coach tilts back at a noticeable angle, and you hear the passengers shifting around inside, trying to find comfortable positions for the long climb ahead. You ease back slightly on the reins, not to slow the horses but to let them know that you're paying attention, that you're sharing the work even though your contribution is measured in awareness rather than muscle power. This is one of the subtleties of driving that takes years to learn. How to be present with the animals without being intrusive, how to guide without controlling, how to lead without dominating. The landscape changes as you climb. the sparse desert vegetation giving way to scattered oak trees and patches of grass that have managed to survive the summer heat. The road curves back and forth across the face of the hill, following the natural contours of the land in a way that makes the grade manageable for heavily loaded wagons and coaches. Someone surveyed this route with considerable skill, finding the path of least resistance through terrain that could easily have been impassable. A hawk circles overhead, riding the thermal currents that are already beginning to form as the sun heats the ground. It hangs motionless in the sky for minutes at a time, a master of efficiency that makes no unnecessary movements. You watch it when you can spare attention from the road, admiring the way it makes difficult things look effortless. The first water stop is about 2 hours out from Murphy's Station, a small spring that seeps from the rocks beside the road and forms a pool just large enough for the horses to drink from. You've been looking forward to this stop since leaving the way station, not because you're particularly thirsty yet, but because it represents the first milestone in the day's journey, the first small victory in the long campaign to reach Millfield. As you approach the spring, you begin the process of slowing the team. With 6 horses and a heavy coach, stopping requires planning and patience. You can't simply haul back on the reins and expect everything to come to a neat halt. Instead, you begin applying gentle pressure well before you want to stop, gradually reducing the horse's pace while using the brake judiciously to control the coach's momentum. Thunder feels the change in the reins and begins to slow, his experience telling him that a stop is coming. The other horses follow his lead, and the coach settles into a walk, then finally stops beside the spring with only the slightest jar. It's a small thing, but stopping smoothly is one of the marks of a skilled driver, a sign that you understand your equipment and your animals. The passengers climb out gratefully, stretching muscles that are already beginning to protest the constant jolting of the coach. The businessman immediately begins complaining about the rough ride, as if somehow you could smooth the road by force of will. The young woman walks a few steps away from the coach and stands quietly, looking out over the landscape with an expression that might be wonder or might be dismay. The journalist takes out a small notebook and begins writing, though what there is to record about a routine water stop is beyond your understanding. You unhitch the horses and lead them to the spring in pairs, holding them back so they don't drink too much too quickly. Water management is critical on these long runs, especially during the hot months when dehydration can disable a horse in a matter of hours. You let each pair drink their fill, but you watch carefully to make sure none of them overindulges. While the horses drink, you walk around the coach again, checking wheels and harness, looking for any problems that might have developed during the first part of the journey. Everything looks good so far, but you've learned never to take anything for granted. The desert has a way of finding the weak point in any system and exploiting it with ruthless efficiency. The spring water is cold and sweet, a sharp contrast to the increasingly warm air. You fill your water bottle and drink deeply, knowing that this may be the last really good water you'll taste until you reach Millfield. Some of the stops along the route have water that's barely fit for the horses, let alone human consumption. The 10-minute stop passes quickly, and soon you're hitching up the horses again, going through the same routine that you'll repeat half a dozen times before the day is over. The passengers climb back into the coach with obvious reluctance, already dreading the hours of punishment that lie ahead. You sympathize with them, but there's nothing to be done about it. The road is what it is, and the coach is what it is, and comfort is a luxury that simply isn't available in this particular form of transportation. You climb back to the driver's box and gather the reins. The sun is noticeably higher now, and the temperature is beginning to climb toward the heat that will make the middle part of the day so challenging. But for now, the morning is still pleasant enough, and you have several hours of relatively good road ahead before you reach the really difficult sections. The horses step out willingly, refreshed by their drink and ready to continue the journey. You settle back into the rhythm of driving, your body automatically adjusting to the coach's movement, your attention divided between the road ahead and the subtle signals coming up through the reins from the horses' mouths. The road continues to climb through increasingly rugged country, winding between hills covered with oak and manzanita. The air smells of dust and dry grass, with occasional hints of the sage that grows in the more open areas. It's a clean smell, free of the smoky pollution that hangs over the cities, and you've grown to associate it with the freedom that comes with working in open country. A small lizard scurries across the road in front of the lead horses, moving so quickly that it's almost invisible. Thunder pays it no attention, long accustomed to the small wildlife that shares these routes. The desert is full of creatures that most people never see, animals that have learned to live in this harsh environment by being either very small, very fast, or very good at hiding. The coach wheels find every rut and stone in the road, transmitting each impact through the wooden frame to your body. After months of this work, you've developed a kind of tolerance for the constant jarring, but it still takes its toll. Your spine feels compressed by the end of each day, and your shoulders ache from the constant effort of maintaining balance and control. But there are compensations. The view from the driver's box is spectacular, especially during the early morning hours when the light is soft and the air is clear. You can see for miles across the rolling landscape, watching the interplay of light and shadow as clouds pass overhead, observing the way the colors change as the sun climbs higher in the sky. A red-tailed hawk perches on a dead tree beside the road, watching your approach with the patient intensity that predators develop. It doesn't fly away as you pass, confident in its ability to avoid any threat you might represent. There's something admirable about that kind of calm confidence, the certainty that comes from being perfectly adapted to your environment. The road levels out for a few miles as you cross a broad valley filled with dry grass and scattered oak trees. This is some of the easier driving of the day, and you allow yourself to relax slightly, though you never completely let down your guard. Complacency is dangerous in this work, and the moment you start taking anything for granted is usually the moment when something goes wrong. The horses appreciate the easier going, and their pace picks up slightly without any urging from you. They know this route as well as you do, and they understand that the flat section is a chance to make good time before the road begins climbing again. Their intelligence and experience are valuable assets, and you've learned to trust their judgment about pace and effort. The businesswoman inside the coach has stopped complaining and seems to have settled into resigned acceptance of his situation. The young woman has pulled her bonnet low over her face and appears to be dozing, swaying with the motion of the coach like a sailor who has found his sea legs. The journalist continues to make occasional notes, though you can't imagine what he finds worth recording in this monotonous landscape. The sun is getting higher now, and you can feel the heat beginning to build in earnest. Your shirt is starting to stick to your back, and the metal parts of the harness are becoming warm to the touch. In another hour or two, they'll be too hot to handle with bare skin, and you'll need to be careful about where you place your hands during any stops. The road begins to climb again as you approach the first of the canyon sections that make this route so challenging. The hills close in on both sides, and the road becomes narrower and more winding. The horses lean into their collars, and you can hear their breathing become more labored as they work against the grade. This is where your skill as a driver becomes crucial. The narrow road leaves little room for error, and the steep grades require careful management of the horse's energy. Push them too hard, and they'll be exhausted before you reach the top. Let them go too slowly, and you'll lose the momentum needed to make the steeper sections. You judge the grade carefully, feeling the angle through your body and the coach's behavior. The brake becomes more important now, not just for stopping but for controlling speed on the descents that follow each climb. Too much speed, and the coach could become uncontrollable, running over the horses or leaving the road entirely. Too little, and the constant braking will wear out the brake shoes and make the horses work harder than necessary. The canyon walls rise on either side of the road, red sandstone carved by centuries of wind and water into fantastic shapes. It's beautiful country, but it's also dangerous. Flash floods can turn these peaceful canyons into death traps in a matter of minutes, and rockfalls are a constant hazard. You've seen coaches that were crushed by falling stones, and you know drivers who've lost their lives to suddenly raging waters that appeared out of clear skies. But today the weather is clear, and the dangers are mostly theoretical. You guide the team through the winding road with practiced skill, reading the surface ahead for soft spots, loose stones, and other hazards. The horses trust your judgment, following your guidance through turns that seem impossibly tight for such a long rig. The air in the canyon is still and hot, trapped between the rock walls like heat in an oven. Sweat begins to run down your face and soak into your shirt collar. The horses are sweating too, dark patches appearing on their coats despite the relatively early hour. You'll need to be careful about their condition as the day heats up, watching for signs of distress that could force an unscheduled stop. A small stream trickles along the bottom of the canyon, following the same route as the road. The water is clear and cold, fed by springs hidden somewhere in the rock walls above. You make a mental note of its location, knowing that it might be useful if you need emergency water for the horses. In country like this, you remember every source of water, every possible refuge, every alternative route that might be available in case of trouble. The canyon begins to open up as you approach the far end, and the road starts to descend toward the next valley. This is one of the trickiest parts of the entire route, a steep downgrade that requires careful brake work and absolute attention to the horse's footing. You've seen coaches get away from their drivers on this descent, and the results are never pretty. You begin applying the brake well before the steepest part of the grade, feeling the wooden shoes grip the iron wheel rims with a grinding sound that sets your teeth on edge. The brake lever requires considerable force to operate effectively, and your right arm will be aching by the time you reach the bottom of the hill. The horses feel the coach's weight pushing against them from behind, and they brace themselves accordingly, their hindquarters working hard to control the descent. Thunder is especially good at this kind of work, knowing exactly how much resistance to provide without fighting the coach's momentum. The other horses follow his lead, creating a coordinated effort that makes the dangerous descent look almost easy. But you know better than to be fooled by appearances. One slip, one moment of inattention, one piece of failed equipment, and the whole rig could be tumbling down the mountainside in a tangle of broken wood, screaming horses, and scattered passengers. You've seen the remains of such accidents, and the images stay with you during every descent, keeping you alert and careful. The passengers inside the coach are getting a thorough shaking as the vehicle lurches and bounces over the rough road surface. You can hear them being thrown around despite their efforts to brace themselves, and you know they'll be bruised and sore by the end of the day. But there's nothing you can do to make the ride smoother except to maintain control and avoid the worst of the obstacles. The road levels out at the bottom of the canyon, and you allow yourself a moment of relief as the immediate danger passes. The horses are breathing hard from their exertions, and their coats are dark with sweat. You'll need to rest them soon, but first you want to get clear of the canyon in case of rockfalls or flash floods. The next few miles pass through more open country, rolling hills covered with grass and scattered trees. The road surface is better here, packed earth that provides good footing for the horses and a relatively smooth ride for the passengers. You make good time across this section, the horses settling into a steady pace that eats up the miles without wearing them down. The sun is directly overhead now, and the heat is becoming serious. The metal parts of the harness are too hot to touch, and the leather is beginning to feel soft and pliable. Your shirt is soaked with sweat, and the wide brim of your hat provides essential but inadequate protection from the blazing sun. You reach into the canvas bag under your seat and pull out a small piece of cloth that you've soaked in water at the last stop. You wipe your face and the back of your neck, feeling the brief coolness before the water evaporates in the dry air. It's a small comfort, but in this heat, small comforts are precious. The horses are feeling the heat too, their heads hanging lower than usual, their pace beginning to slow despite your gentle urging. You'll need to find water for them soon, and shade if possible. Heat exhaustion can kill a horse quickly, and without the horses, everyone in the coach would be stranded in the middle of nowhere. Fortunately, the next water stop is only a few miles ahead, a small way station run by an old prospector who gave up looking for gold and decided to make his living providing services to travelers. It's not much of a place, just a crude cabin and a corral built around a reliable spring, but the water is good and the man knows how to care for horses. As you approach the way station, you can see the prospector waiting in the shade of his crude porch, a tin cup of water in his weathered hands. He raises one hand in greeting, understanding without words that you need water for the horses and a few minutes of rest before continuing on through the worst heat of the day. You bring the team to a stop beside the corral with practiced ease, the brake lever warm under your palm despite your gloves. The horses stand with their heads lowered, sides heaving slightly from the exertion and the heat. Steam rises faintly from their coats where the sweat has soaked through, and you can smell the familiar scent of working animals mixed with dust and leather. The prospector approaches slowly, his boots crunching on the sandy ground. His name is Willem, though most people just call him Dutch, and he's been running this small station for nearly a decade. His face is burned dark by years of desert sun, and his beard is streaked with gray, but his eyes are still sharp and his handshake firm. You climb down from the driver's box, feeling your legs protest after hours of maintaining balance and tension. The ground feels strange and solid under your feet after so long absorbing the constant motion of the coach. You work your shoulders slowly, trying to ease the knots that have formed between your shoulder blades from gripping the reins and fighting the coach's movements. The passengers emerge from the coach like people escaping from a torture chamber, their faces flushed with heat and their clothes wrinkled and dusty. The businessman immediately begins complaining about the temperature inside the coach, as if somehow you could control the sun's intensity through force of will. The young woman looks pale and slightly sick, probably from the combination of heat and constant motion. The journalist seems to be taking everything in stride, making more notes in his little book. You unhitch the horses methodically, leading them in pairs to the water trough that sits in the precious shade beside the cabin. The water is cool and clear, pumped fresh from the spring that makes this stop possible. You hold each pair back, letting them drink slowly so they don't make themselves sick by taking too much water too quickly when they're overheated. Thunder drinks steadily, his throat working as he swallows the cool water. You can see the relief in his posture as the liquid soothes his dry mouth and begins to cool his internal temperature. The other horses follow his example, drinking deeply but not frantically, their trust in your management extending even to something as basic as water consumption. While the horses drink, Dutch approaches with a bucket of cool water and a clean rag. Without being asked, he begins sponging down the horses' necks and chests, helping to cool them more quickly than air alone could manage. It's the kind of thoughtful service that marks the difference between a good way station and a merely adequate one. You accept a tin cup of water from Dutch, drinking it slowly despite your thirst. The water is sweet and cold, with the faint mineral taste that comes from deep springs. It's some of the best water you'll taste all day, and you savor it while watching the horses recover from their morning's work. The shade feels like a benediction after hours under the merciless sun. You remove your hat and wipe your forehead with your sleeve, feeling the sweat that has accumulated despite the hat's protection. Your shirt is soaked through in places, and you can feel salt crystals forming where the sweat has dried on your skin. Dutch disappears into his cabin and returns with a small jar of something that looks like axle grease but smells of herbs and pine sap. He offers it without explanation, and you recognize it as a salve for preventing sunburn and treating the raw spots that develop from constant exposure to wind and dust. You accept it gratefully, rubbing a small amount on the back of your neck and the exposed skin of your wrists. The businessman has found a patch of shade near the cabin and stands there fanning himself with his hat, still muttering about the heat and the roughness of the road. You ignore his complaints, having learned long ago that some people find fault with everything and that arguing with them only wastes energy you need for more important things. The young woman has accepted a cup of water from Dutch and sits on a crude wooden bench in the shade, sipping slowly and looking out over the desert landscape with an expression that might be wonder or might be despair. This kind of travel is hard on everyone, but it's especially difficult for people who aren't accustomed to the physical demands and the complete lack of comfort. The journalist continues to write in his notebook, occasionally asking Dutch questions about the history of the station and the challenges of maintaining a water source in this dry country. Dutch answers politely but briefly, more interested in caring for the horses than in providing material for whatever story the man is planning to write. You walk around the coach again, checking wheels and fittings, looking for any problems that might have developed during the morning's travel. The front right wheel shows some wear on the iron tire, but nothing serious yet. The throw braces are holding well despite the constant stress, though the leather is beginning to crack near one of the mounting points. The brake shoes are wearing thin, as always. They're made of wood and leather, designed to be replaced regularly rather than to last forever. You make a mental note to have them checked when you reach Millfield, assuming the station there has the materials and skills needed for the work. Inside the passenger compartment, you brush out the accumulated dust and check the seat cushions for damage. The constant jolting has worked one of the buttons loose on the rear seat, but it's nothing that will affect the passenger's safety or comfort significantly. Still, you make note of it for the next major maintenance period. Your lunch bag sits under the driver's seat, the contents probably warm by now but still edible. You're not particularly hungry yet, but you know you'll need the food to sustain you through the afternoon's travel. The bread will be dry and the cheese soft, but they'll provide the energy you need to maintain focus and strength for the remaining hours of the journey. The 15-minute stop passes quickly, as these breaks always do. There's never quite enough time to fully rest, to let your body completely recover from the strain of driving, but it's enough to provide essential relief for both horses and humans. You begin the familiar process of hitching up again, checking each strap and buckle, making sure everything is secure for the next stage of the journey. The horses seem refreshed by their drink and the brief rest, their heads higher and their posture more alert. They understand the routine as well as you do, and they move into position without guidance, each animal taking its accustomed place in the team. Thunder shakes his head and snorts softly, ready to continue the work. The passengers climb back into the coach with obvious reluctance, knowing that the afternoon will bring the worst heat of the day and the most challenging sections of the route. The businessman has stopped complaining, perhaps realizing that his words have no effect on the situation. The young woman pulls her bonnet low over her face and settles herself as comfortably as possible in the corner of the seat. You climb back to the driver's box and gather the reins, feeling their familiar weight in your hands. The leather is warm now, almost hot to the touch, and you're glad for the protection of your driving gloves. The metal bits and buckles on the harness gleam in the bright sunlight, too hot to touch with bare skin. Dutch steps back and raises his hand in farewell, the traditional gesture that marks the end of a stop and the beginning of the next stage of the journey. You touch your hat brim in response and release the brake. The horses lean into their collars, and the coach begins to move forward with the familiar creaking and rattling that will be your constant companion for the rest of the day. The road away from Dutch's station leads across a broad valley filled with dry grass and scattered mesquite. The surface is better here than in the canyons, but the heat rising from the ground creates shimmering mirages that make it difficult to judge distances accurately. The air itself seems to ripple and dance, distorting the landscape into something dreamlike and unreal. The sun is directly overhead now, a merciless white disk that seems to drain color from everything it touches. The sky has faded from blue to a harsh, bleached white, and even the distant mountains seem to waver and shift in the heat haze. Your hat provides some protection, but you can feel the sun's intensity on your shoulders and arms, penetrating the fabric of your shirt and heating your skin. The horses move more slowly now, their energy sapped by the extreme temperature. You don't push them, understanding that heat exhaustion can kill an animal quickly and that your own safety depends on maintaining their strength for the long haul. Instead, you let them find their own pace, trusting their instincts about how much effort they can sustain. Sweat runs down your face in steady streams, stinging your eyes and leaving salt trails on your cheeks. Your shirt is soaked through, clinging uncomfortably to your back and chest. The metal parts of the coach and harness are too hot to touch, radiating heat like small furnaces. Even the wooden surfaces are warm to the touch, having absorbed hours of direct sunlight. The road begins to climb again as you approach the next range of hills, and the horses lean into their work with visible effort. Their breathing becomes labored, and dark patches of sweat spread across their coats. You watch them carefully for signs of distress, ready to stop if any of them shows symptoms of heat exhaustion. A dust devil spins across the valley floor ahead of you, a miniature tornado of sand and debris that dances erratically across the landscape before dissipating as suddenly as it formed. The horses pay it no attention, accustomed to the strange weather phenomena that are common in this desert country. The road surface becomes rougher as you climb, and the coach begins to lurch and bounce more violently. The passengers inside are getting a thorough shaking, and you can hear them struggling to maintain their positions despite their efforts to brace themselves. But there's nothing you can do to make the ride smoother except to pick the best line through the obstacles and avoid the worst of the holes and rocks. Your right arm aches from working the brake lever during the descents, and your left shoulder is stiff from the constant effort of controlling the reins. The wooden seat of the driver's box has become uncomfortable despite months of use, and you shift your weight frequently, trying to find a position that doesn't put pressure on the sorest spots. But you've learned to endure these discomforts, to accept them as part of the job rather than fighting against them. The human body can adapt to remarkable amounts of punishment if the mind doesn't resist the experience. You've developed a kind of stoic acceptance that allows you to function despite pain and fatigue. The road levels out again as you cross another valley, this one smaller and more enclosed than the last. The grass here is even drier, burned yellow by the sun and crackling underfoot when the wind stirs it. A few hardy shrubs dot the landscape, their leaves gray-green and coated with dust. You pass the remains of an old campsite, just a circle of blackened stones and some scattered bones that might have come from cattle or might have been left by previous travelers. These remnants of human passage are common along the stagecoach routes, evidence of the constant stream of people moving across the continent in search of new opportunities or simply trying to get from one place to another. A vulture circles high overhead, riding the thermal currents with motionless wings. It's too high to be interested in anything immediately below, but its presence serves as a reminder of the dangers inherent in traveling through this harsh country. The desert is littered with the bones of animals and occasionally humans who underestimated its challenges. The horses plod steadily onward, their heads hanging lower as the heat takes its toll. You've learned to read their condition through subtle signs. The way they hold their ears, the rhythm of their breathing, the set of their shoulders as they lean into the traces. So far they're managing well, but you know the afternoon will test their endurance. Your water bottle is warm to the touch, the liquid inside heated by hours of exposure to the sun. You take small sips occasionally, rationing the precious fluid carefully. There's water at the next major stop, but that's still several hours away, and in this heat, dehydration can become dangerous quickly. The road begins to descend toward a creek bed that marks the lowest point of the valley. The creek is dry now, just a sandy depression lined with cottonwood trees whose leaves hang limp and dusty in the still air. But the trees indicate that water runs here during the rainy season, and their presence provides a brief psychological relief from the harsh monotony of the desert. As you guide the team down the gentle slope toward the creek bed, you notice dark clouds building on the western horizon. They're still many miles away, but they represent the possibility of afternoon thunderstorms that could bring both relief from the heat and new dangers in the form of flash floods and lightning. You cross the dry creek bed carefully, watching for soft sand that might trap the coach wheels or cause the horses to stumble. The crossing goes smoothly, but you make note of the location for future reference. Creek beds can become raging torrents with very little warning, and knowing where the safe crossing points are located can mean the difference between life and death during the rainy season. The road climbs out of the creek bed and continues across rolling terrain dotted with occasional oak trees that provide tiny islands of shade in the vast expanse of sun-baked earth. You notice that the shadows cast by these trees are noticeably shorter now, indicating that the sun has passed its zenith and begun its slow descent toward the western horizon. But the heat continues to build, radiating up from the ground in waves that make everything shimmer and dance. The horses are moving more slowly now, their energy sapped by the extreme temperature. Their breathing is labored, and foam has begun to form around their bits where saliva and sweat mix together. You reach under your seat and pull out a piece of cloth that you've kept damp for this purpose. You wipe your face and neck, feeling the momentary relief as the moisture evaporates in the dry air. It's a small comfort, but in conditions like these, small comforts are precious beyond measure. The road ahead stretches endlessly across the shimmering landscape, a ribbon of packed earth that seems to dissolve into the heat haze before reappearing in the distance. Mile markers are few and far between in this country, and distance is measured more by the passage of time and the condition of the horses than by any precise geographical references. You pass a small grave marked by a simple wooden cross and a pile of stones. The inscription, if there ever was one, has been worn away by wind and weather, leaving no indication of who lies buried there or how they met their fate. Such graves are common along the frontier routes, silent testimony to the risks involved in traveling through this unforgiving country. The horses continue their steady pace, but you can see that the heat is beginning to affect them more seriously. Thunder's usually alert ears are drooping, and Molly's head hangs lower than usual. The other horses show similar signs of fatigue, their steps becoming less coordinated as exhaustion sets in. You begin to watch the horizon more carefully, looking for any sign of the next way station or water source. The schedule in your head says you should reach Miller's Crossing in another 2 hours, but schedules mean little when the heat is this severe and the horses are showing signs of distress. A jackrabbit bounds across the road ahead of the team, its powerful hind legs carrying it in long, graceful leaps toward the meager shelter of a mesquite thicket. The horses barely acknowledge its presence, too focused on their own discomfort to be distracted by wildlife. The landscape begins to change as you approach the next range of hills, the grass giving way to rocky ground dotted with cactus and thorny shrubs. The road becomes more winding, following the natural contours of the land as it seeks the easiest path through the increasingly rugged terrain. You can hear the passengers moving around inside the coach, probably trying to find positions that provide some relief from the heat and the constant jolting. The businessman has stopped complaining, perhaps finally understanding that his words have no power to change the circumstances. The young woman's face appears briefly at the window, pale and drawn with fatigue. The brake lever is almost too hot to touch even through your gloves, and you have to be careful about how you grip it during the descents. The metal has absorbed so much heat from the sun that it radiates warmth like a small stove. Every piece of equipment becomes an enemy in conditions like these, turning against the people who depend on it. Your mouth feels dry and gritty, coated with dust that has worked its way past your neckerchief despite your efforts to keep it out. The air itself seems thick and oppressive, lacking the clarity and freshness that makes breathing a pleasure rather than a chore. Each breath feels like swallowing fire, and you find yourself breathing through your nose to minimize the discomfort. The road climbs steadily now, winding back and forth across the face of a long ridge that offers no shade and no relief from the sun's intensity. The horses lean into their collars with obvious effort, their breathing becoming more labored with each step. You watch them carefully, ready to stop if any of them shows signs of serious distress. A red-tailed hawk perches on a dead snag beside the road, its beak open as it pants in the heat. Even the wildlife is struggling with the extreme temperature, seeking whatever shade and relief they can find. The hawk watches your passage with dull eyes, too heat-stunned to show much interest in the unusual sight of humans and horses. The wheels of the coach crunch over loose gravel and small stones, the sound sharp and grating in the still air. Dust rises in small puffs from each footfall and wheel revolution, creating a persistent cloud that follows your progress across the landscape. The dust gets into everything, coating your clothes, your skin, your hair, working its way into your mouth and nose despite your best efforts to keep it out. You reach the crest of the ridge and pause for a moment to let the horses catch their breath. The view from this elevation is spectacular but harsh, stretching for miles across a landscape that seems burned and lifeless under the relentless sun. In the distance, you can see the dark line of trees that marks Miller's Crossing, still several miles away but offering the promise of water and shade. The descent from the ridge is steep and requires careful brake work to prevent the coach from running away. The wooden brake shoes grip the iron wheel rims with a grinding sound that sets your teeth on edge, and the effort required to maintain pressure on the brake lever sends shooting pains up your right arm. The horses brace themselves against the coach's weight, their hindquarters working hard to control the descent. Thunder is especially good at this work, his experience and judgment allowing him to provide just the right amount of resistance without fighting the coach's momentum. The other horses follow his lead, creating a coordinated effort that makes the dangerous descent manageable. At the bottom of the hill, the road crosses a small stream that actually has water in it, fed by springs somewhere in the mountains to the north. The sight of flowing water is like a miracle after hours of traveling through parched landscape, and you can see the horses' ears prick forward as they catch the scent of moisture. You stop the coach at the stream crossing and climb down to examine the water. It's clear and cool, running over smooth stones with a gentle murmuring sound that seems impossibly refreshing after the harsh silence of the desert. You test it carefully, making sure it's safe to drink before allowing the horses to approach. The horses drink eagerly but not frantically, their training overriding their thirst. You let each pair drink their fill, watching to make sure none of them overindulges. The cool water seems to revive them somewhat, and you can see some of their alertness returning as the liquid begins to cool their internal temperature. You fill your water bottle from the stream, the liquid so cold it almost hurts your teeth when you drink it. The contrast with your overheated body is shocking, and you have to resist the urge to drink too much too quickly. Instead, you sip slowly, letting the water cool your mouth and throat gradually. The passengers emerge from the coach to stretch their legs and take advantage of the water. The businessman kneels by the stream and splashes water on his face and neck, sighing with relief as the liquid cools his overheated skin. The young woman sits in the shade of a small willow tree, fanning herself with her bonnet while sipping water from a cup that Dutch had provided at the last stop. The journalist seems less affected by the heat than the others, perhaps because he's been taking notes and staying mentally engaged rather than simply enduring the journey passively. He walks along the stream bank, examining the plant life and making more entries in his notebook. This unscheduled stop stretches longer than usual as everyone takes advantage of the unexpected relief. You don't begrudge the extra time, understanding that both horses and passengers need this respite from the extreme conditions. The schedule is important, but not more important than the safety and welfare of everyone involved in the journey. The horses stand in the shallow water, letting it cool their legs and hooves. Steam rises faintly from their bodies where the cool water meets their overheated skin. Their breathing gradually returns to normal, and you can see their condition improving with each passing minute. You take the opportunity to check the harness more thoroughly, looking for any signs of chafing or wear that might have been aggravated by the heat and sweat. The leather is soft and pliable from the moisture, easier to work with than the stiff, dry material it becomes under normal desert conditions. One of the traces shows some wear near a buckle, nothing dangerous yet but something to watch. The heat and constant flexing can weaken leather in ways that aren't immediately obvious, and you've learned to look for the subtle signs that indicate potential failure. The stream crossing is one of the highlights of this particular route, a small oasis that provides essential relief during the hottest part of the day. You've been looking forward to it since leaving Dutch's station, knowing that it would offer exactly the kind of respite that both you and the horses would need. But eventually, the demands of the schedule reassert themselves, and you begin the process of getting everyone ready to continue the journey. The passengers climb back into the coach with obvious reluctance, having experienced a taste of comfort that makes the prospect of returning to the oven-like interior particularly unappealing. You guide the horses out of the stream and back onto the road, feeling the heat hit you like a physical blow as you leave the small pocket of coolness behind. The contrast makes the temperature seem even more extreme than before, and you have to readjust mentally to the harsh reality of desert travel. The road continues across rolling terrain that offers no shade and little variation in the monotonous landscape. The grass here is even more sparse, and the soil has a baked, cracked appearance that speaks of months without significant rainfall. Occasional dust devils dance across the open spaces, miniature tornadoes of sand and debris that appear and disappear without warning. The refreshing effects of the stream stop begin to wear off as the sun reasserts its dominance over the landscape and your body. Sweat begins to flow again, and the familiar aches and pains of long-distance driving return with renewed intensity. Your shirt, briefly cooled by the stream water, becomes hot and sticky once more. The horses settle back into their traveling pace, but you can see that the brief respite has helped their condition significantly. Their steps are more coordinated, their breathing easier, their overall posture more alert. The cool water has bought you several more hours of safe travel, perhaps enough to reach Miller's Crossing before the heat becomes truly dangerous. A small lizard scurries across the road in front of the team, moving so quickly that it's almost invisible against the sun-baked earth. These desert creatures have learned to minimize their exposure to the deadly heat, conducting most of their business during the cooler hours of dawn and dusk. The road begins to climb again, winding up the side of a long, gradual slope that stretches for miles ahead. The horses lean into their work with renewed vigor, the effects of their drink and rest still providing them with energy reserves they didn't have before the stream crossing. You settle back into the rhythm of long-distance driving, your body finding the familiar balance point that allows you to absorb the coach's movement without fighting it. The constant small adjustments become automatic, freeing your conscious mind to focus on reading the road ahead and monitoring the horse's condition. The landscape stretches endlessly in all directions, a vast expanse of sun-baked earth that seems to go on forever. Distance becomes meaningless in country like this, Where landmarks are few and the horizon seems to recede as fast as you approach it. Progress is measured in hours rather than miles, in the gradual shifting of shadows and the slow movement of the sun across the sky. A vulture circles high overhead, riding the thermal currents with effortless grace. It's joined by another, then another, until a small group of the birds wheels slowly through the superheated air. They're probably attracted by some dead animal somewhere in the area, but their presence serves as a reminder of the thin margin between life and death in this harsh environment. The coach wheels find every rut and stone in the road, transmitting each impact through the wooden frame to your body. The constant jarring has become so familiar that you barely notice it consciously, but your muscles and bones register every shock, adding to the accumulated fatigue that builds throughout the day. Your hat brim provides essential protection from the direct rays of the sun, but it can't shield you from the heat that radiates up from the ground and reflects off every surface. The air itself seems to shimmer with intensity, creating optical illusions that make it difficult to judge distances and terrain features accurately. The road levels out as you cross another valley, this one even more desolate than the last. The vegetation here is sparse and stunted, adapted to survive in conditions that would kill most plant life. A few barrel cacti dot the landscape, their thick, waxy surfaces designed to conserve every drop of precious moisture. You pass another grave marker, this one just a pile of stones with no cross or inscription. Someone is buried here, someone who didn't complete their journey across this unforgiving landscape. You touch your hat brim in a brief gesture of respect for the unknown traveler. The horses continue their steady pace, but you can see that the extreme heat is beginning to take its toll once again. Their heads hang lower, and their breathing becomes more labored as the temperature climbs toward its daily peak. You watch them carefully, ready to make another unscheduled stop if their condition deteriorates significantly. The sun beats down with relentless intensity, turning every metal surface into a potential source of burns and making the air itself seem thick and oppressive. Your shirt clings to your back, soaked with sweat that evaporates almost as quickly as it forms, leaving behind salt crystals that make your skin feel gritty and uncomfortable. In the distance, you can see the dark line of trees that marks Miller's Crossing, still several miles away but close enough now to provide a definite goal. The sight of those trees, promising shade and water and rest, gives you the motivation to push through the worst heat of the day. The road begins to descend gradually toward the crossing, and you can feel a slight stirring in the air that might be the beginning of an afternoon breeze. The horses seem to sense it too, their ears pricking forward slightly as they catch the first hint of moving air. As you approach Miller's Crossing, you can see smoke rising from the chimney of the way station, indicating that someone is there to provide the services that travelers need. The sight of that smoke, so ordinary and domestic, seems almost miraculous after hours of traveling through empty wilderness. The horses quicken their pace slightly, perhaps catching the scent of water and feed that awaits them at the station. Their instincts tell them that relief is near, and they find reserves of energy that seemed depleted just minutes before. You guide the team down the final slope toward the crossing, feeling a sense of accomplishment at having successfully navigated another stage of the journey. The worst heat of the day is past, and while there are still hours of travel ahead, the immediate crisis of extreme temperature has been survived. Miller's Crossing sits in a grove of cottonwood trees beside a creek that actually has running water year-round. The station consists of a main building, a corral, and several outbuildings, all constructed of logs and adobe in the practical style that characterizes frontier architecture. Smoke rises from the chimney, and you can see figures moving around the buildings. You bring the coach to a stop in the shade of the largest cottonwood, feeling the blessed relief of being out of direct sunlight for the first time in hours. The temperature difference is remarkable, perhaps 20 degrees cooler in the shade than it was on the open road. The station keeper emerges from the main building, a woman of middle age with graying hair and the kind of competent, no-nonsense manner that marks successful frontier businesses. Her name is Sarah Miller, and she's been running this crossing for nearly 15 years, providing reliable service to the constant stream of travelers who pass through. You climb down from the driver's box, your legs stiff and sore from hours of maintaining balance and control. The ground feels wonderfully solid and stable after the constant motion of the coach, and you take a moment to stretch and work the kinks out of your back and shoulders. The horses stand with their heads lowered, exhausted by their battle with the heat but still alert and responsive. You can see the relief in their posture as they realize they've reached sanctuary, a place where they'll receive the care and attention they need to recover from their ordeal. Sarah approaches with a bucket of cool water and begins the process of caring for the horses, working with the kind of efficiency that comes from years of experience. She knows exactly what animals need after traveling through extreme heat, and she begins the cooling process immediately. The passengers emerge from the coach like people escaping from a prison, their faces flushed and drawn with fatigue. They've endured conditions that would have been considered torture under other circumstances, and their relief at reaching the crossing is palpable. The businessman immediately seeks the shade of the porch, where he collapses into a wooden chair and fans himself with his hat. The young woman accepts a cup of water from Sarah and sips it slowly, her hands shaking slightly from exhaustion and heat. The journalist continues to make notes, though what he finds worth recording in this routine stop is unclear. You help Sarah unhitch the horses and lead them to the corral, where fresh water and feed await. The animals drink deeply but carefully, their training overriding their desperate thirst. The cool water and the shade of the trees begin to work their restorative magic almost immediately. Sarah provides a basin of water for you to wash your face and hands, and the simple act of cleaning away the accumulated dust and sweat feels luxurious after hours of enduring the grime of travel. The water is cool and clean, pumped fresh from a well that taps into the underground stream that feeds the creek. The station offers simple but adequate meals, and you accept a plate of beans and bread with gratitude. The food is plain but nourishing, exactly what you need to sustain yourself through the remaining hours of the journey. You eat slowly, savoring both the taste and the opportunity to rest in the shade. This stop at Miller's Crossing marks the halfway point of your journey, the moment when the focus shifts from the morning's challenges to the afternoon's demands. The worst heat is behind you now, but there are still many miles to cover before you reach Millfield and the end of the day's work. The horses seem to recover quickly in the favorable conditions, their breathing returning to normal and their alertness improving with each passing minute. The combination of water, feed, shade, and rest works its magic, preparing them for the second half of their daily ordeal. You spend the allocated 30 minutes checking equipment and making minor adjustments to the harness. The leather has softened somewhat in the heat, requiring some retightening of straps and buckles. The brake shoes show additional wear, but they should last until you reach your destination. The passengers seem reluctant to leave the comfort of the shaded station, but the demands of the schedule eventually force the resumption of travel. They climb back into the coach with resignation rather than enthusiasm, knowing that several more hours of punishment await them. You harness the horses once again, going through the familiar routine with practiced efficiency. The animals seem refreshed and ready to continue, though you know the afternoon will test their endurance once more. The sun is past its peak now, but the accumulated heat in the earth and air will keep temperatures high for several more hours. Sarah waves farewell as you pull away from the crossing, and you touch your hat brim in response. Her station represents a crucial link in the chain of services that makes long-distance travel possible, and you appreciate the professionalism and care she brings to her work. The road away from Miller's Crossing leads through more varied terrain, with hills and valleys providing some visual relief from the monotony of flat desert. The vegetation is slightly more diverse here, with oak trees and manzanita bushes adding texture to the landscape. The horses settle into their traveling pace with renewed energy, the effects of their rest and refreshment still evident in their gait and posture. They know they're heading into the final phase of the journey, and their experience tells them that endurance now will be rewarded with rest and care at day's end. The sun begins its slow descent toward the western horizon, and while the temperature remains high, there's a subtle change in the quality of the light that suggests the worst heat is behind you. Shadows begin to lengthen slightly, providing occasional patches of relief along the roadside. You pass through a small canyon where the walls provide blessed shade for a few precious minutes. The temperature drops noticeably in the shadow of the rocks, and you can hear the passengers sighing with relief as they experience their first comfort in hours. A small stream trickles along the bottom of the canyon, and you stop briefly to let the horses drink and to refill your water bottle. The water is cool and sweet, probably fed by springs somewhere in the surrounding hills. These small oases make the difference between survival and disaster in country like this. The road climbs out of the canyon and continues across rolling hills covered with dry grass and scattered oak trees. The landscape has a golden quality now as the afternoon light begins to slant across the terrain, creating patterns of light and shadow that are almost beautiful despite the harsh conditions. You can see dust clouds in the distance, probably raised by other travelers or perhaps cattle being moved to new grazing areas. The sight of that dust serves as a reminder that you're not alone in this vast landscape, that other people are pursuing their own purposes across the same challenging terrain. The horses continue their steady progress, but you can see that fatigue is beginning to accumulate despite their rest at Miller's Crossing. Their steps are not quite as coordinated as they were earlier, and their heads hang slightly lower than usual. Still, they're managing well, and you estimate they have enough energy reserves to complete the journey safely. Your own fatigue is becoming more noticeable as the day wears on. Your shoulders ache from the constant effort of maintaining control, and your back is stiff from hours of sitting in the same position. The wooden seat of the driver's box, comfortable enough for short distances, becomes less and less tolerable as the hours accumulate. But you've learned to endure these discomforts, to accept them as simply part of the job rather than obstacles to be overcome. The human body can adapt to remarkable levels of punishment if the mind doesn't resist the experience. Mental toughness is as important as physical strength in work like this. The road passes through a small settlement, just a few buildings clustered around a crossroads where two minor trails intersect with your main route. The buildings are low and weathered, their adobe walls blending into the dusty earth as if they've grown out of it. A general store with a sagging porch sits on one side of the crossroads, its faded sign creaking in the faint breeze. Across from it, a blacksmith's shed stands open, the clang of hammer on iron echoing faintly as the smith works at his forge. A few chickens scratch in the dirt near a small saloon, where a single horse is tied to a post, its tail flicking lazily at flies. The air smells of baked earth and the faint tang of coal smoke from the blacksmith's fire. You guide the team past the settlement, keeping the reins steady as the horses step carefully over the uneven ground where the trails meet. The passengers peer out the windows, their faces pressed close to the dusty glass, perhaps hoping for a glimpse of something new to break the monotony of the journey. But there's little to see here, just the quiet rhythm of a place that exists to serve those passing through. The road stretches out again, leaving the settlement behind as it winds through a landscape of low hills and scattered sagebrush. The sun is lower now, casting long shadows that stretch across the ground like fingers reaching for the horizon. The heat is still oppressive, but there's a subtle softening in the air, a hint that the worst of the day's fire is beginning to fade. Your hands ache from gripping the reins, the leather having worn faint grooves into your gloves where your fingers curl around them hour after hour. You shift your weight on the driver's box, trying to ease the pressure on your lower back, which has begun to protest the constant jarring of the coach. The wooden seat is unforgiving, its surface polished smooth by years of drivers but offering no comfort after so many miles. You roll your shoulders slowly, feeling the tightness in the muscles, the way they knot and pull from the effort of keeping the team in line. The horses move steadily, their hooves kicking up small clouds of dust that drift away on the breeze. Thunder leads with his usual calm assurance, his ears flicking back occasionally to check for your signals. Molly matches his pace, her stride smooth despite the long hours of work. The other horses follow their lead, their breathing steady but heavy, the sound mingling with the creak of leather harnesses and the rattle of the coach wheels. You can feel their fatigue through the reins, a slight sluggishness in their response, but they keep moving, driven by the same stubborn endurance that carries you through each day. You speak to them softly, your voice low and steady, offering encouragement they may not understand but seem to feel. The words are more for you than for them, a way to break the silence that wraps around you like the heat. The road dips into a shallow valley, the ground here softer and marked by the ruts of countless wagons and coaches that have passed before. The wheels find every groove, jolting the coach in a way that sends fresh aches through your spine. You brace your feet against the footboard, leaning slightly into the motion to absorb the impact. The passengers inside shift and murmur, their voices muffled but carrying the edge of discomfort. The young woman has stopped looking out the window, her bonnet pulled low as she sways with the coach's movement, perhaps trying to sleep through the worst of it. The businessman has grown quiet, his complaints exhausted by the reality of the journey. The journalist still scribbles in his notebook, though you wonder how he can write with the coach bouncing as it does. A lone cottonwood tree stands ahead, its leaves trembling in the faint breeze, offering a rare patch of shade. You guide the team toward it, deciding to give them a brief rest before tackling the next climb. The brake lever is warm under your palm as you ease it forward, the wooden shoes grinding against the wheels with a familiar groan. The coach slows, then stops, the horses standing with their heads lowered, grateful for the pause. You climb down from the box, your boots sinking slightly into the sandy soil as you land. The ground feels solid and strange after hours of swaying with the coach, and you take a moment to stretch, feeling the stiffness in your legs and hips. The air under the cottonwood is cooler, the shade a small mercy that soothes your sunburned skin. You pull off your hat and wipe your forehead with the back of your glove, the fabric rough against your skin but damp with sweat. The horses stand patiently as you check their condition, running your hands along their sweaty flanks, feeling for any signs of strain. Thunder's coat is dark with moisture, but his breathing is steady, his eyes clear. You pat his neck, murmuring praise as you move to Molly, then the others, checking hooves and harnesses with the same careful attention you've given them all day. The shade helps, but the air is still heavy with heat, and you can see the horses' sides heaving as they recover from the morning's work. You fetch the water bottle from under the driver's seat, taking a careful sip before offering some to the horses, pouring it into your hat for them to drink. They lap at it eagerly, their tongues splashing the water as they take small, controlled sips. The passengers climb out of the coach, stretching and shaking out cramped limbs. The businessman finds a spot under the tree and sits heavily, fanning himself with a folded newspaper he pulls from his coat pocket. The young woman walks a few steps away, her hands smoothing her dusty skirt as she gazes out over the valley, her expression unreadable. The journalist leans against the coach, still writing, his pencil moving in short, quick strokes as he records something about the landscape or the journey. You let them be, focusing on your own tasks, knowing that these brief stops are as much for the passenger's sanity as for the horse's health. You walk around the coach, checking the wheels and axles for signs of wear. The iron tires are holding up, though the right front wheel shows a slight wobble that you'll need to address in Millfield. The thoroughbraces creak as you press against them, testing their tension, the leather still holding despite the cracks you noted earlier. You tighten a loose strap on the harness, your fingers working the buckle with practiced ease, the metal warm even through your gloves. The toolbox under the seat is secure, its contents undisturbed by the day's jolts. You make a mental note to oil the brake mechanism tonight, as the heat has made it slightly sluggish, the lever requiring more effort than usual. The shade of the cottonwood is a fleeting comfort, and soon you must move on. You call to the passengers, your voice calm but firm, signaling that it's time to continue. They return to the coach slowly, their steps heavy with reluctance. The businessman mutters something under his breath as he climbs aboard, but you pay it no mind. The young woman adjusts her bonnet, her movements careful and deliberate, as if she's trying to hold herself together through sheer will. The journalist tucks his notebook into his pocket and climbs in last, his expression thoughtful but distant. You settle back onto the driver's box, the wood warm against your thighs, and gather the reins once more. The leather feels familiar, almost an extension of your hands, and you release the brake with a gentle nudge. The horses step forward, their hooves stirring the dust as the coach rolls out from under the cottonwood's shade. The sun hits you like a wave, its heat sinking into your shoulders and neck, reawakening the burn on your skin. The road climbs steadily now, winding up the side of a low ridge where the ground is rocky and the vegetation sparse. The horses lean into their collars, their breathing deepening as they work against the incline. You keep the reins light but firm, guiding them through the twists and turns, your eyes scanning the road for loose stones or ruts that could cause trouble. The wheels crunch over gravel, the sound sharp in the quiet afternoon, and you feel every jolt through the seat, your body absorbing the rhythm of the journey. The ridge offers a view of the valley below, the landscape stretching out in shades of gold and brown under the slanting light. A distant herd of antelope moves across the plain, their forms shimmering in the heat haze, their movements graceful and unhurried. You watch them for a moment, a small distraction from the monotony of the road, their presence a reminder of the life that persists in this harsh country. The air smells of dust and sage, with a faint hint of creosote from the bushes scattered across the hillside. The breeze is stronger now, carrying the scent and cooling your sweat-soaked shirt, though it does little to ease the heat radiating from the ground. The road levels out at the top of the ridge, and you let the horses slow slightly, giving them a chance to catch their breath. Their coats are dark with sweat, and foam has begun to form around their bits again, a sign of the effort they're expending. You speak to them softly, your voice a low murmur that seems to steady them, though it's as much for your own comfort as theirs. The reins are slick with sweat, and you adjust your grip, feeling the leather slide against your gloves. The brake lever is hot to the touch, and you use it sparingly, letting the horse's steady pace control the coach's momentum on the gentle descent that follows. The landscape opens up as you leave the ridge behind, the road stretching across a broad plain dotted with mesquite and yucca. The sun is lower now, its light softer but still intense, painting the ground in long shadows that shift with the coach's movement. A jackrabbit darts across the road, its ears upright as it bounds toward a patch of scrub. The horses ignore it, their focus on the steady rhythm of their steps, their hooves kicking up small puffs of dust that drift away on the breeze. You can feel the day's fatigue settling into your bones, a deep ache that radiates from your shoulders to your hips, but you push it aside, focusing on the road ahead and the horse's steady progress. A small stream crosses the road a few miles later, its water shallow but clear, fed by some hidden spring in the hills. You stop the coach, the brake groaning as you ease it forward, and climb down to check the crossing. The stream is safe, the bottom firm and free of soft sand that could trap the wheels. You lead the horses across one pair at a time, their hooves splashing through the water, sending up small sprays that catch the sunlight. They drink briefly, their lips rippling the surface, and you refill your water bottle, the cold liquid a sharp relief against your parched throat. The passengers remain in the coach, too tired to climb out for such a short stop, their silhouettes visible through the dusty windows. You guide the team back onto the road, the coach wheels crunching over gravel as you leave the stream behind. The air is cooler now, the sun dipping toward the horizon, its light turning the landscape golden and softening the harsh edges of the day. The horses move with a renewed sense of purpose, perhaps sensing that the end of the journey is near. Their steps are still steady, though you can see the fatigue in their posture, the way their heads hang just a fraction lower than they did this morning. The road winds through a series of low hills, the terrain becoming more rugged as you approach Millfield. The wheels find every rut, the coach swaying and jolting in a way that tests your balance and patience. Your hands are sore from gripping the reins, your fingers stiff despite the gloves, and you flex them carefully, trying to ease the tension without losing control. The brake lever requires more effort now, the wooden shoes worn thin from the day's descents, but it holds, and you guide the team through the twists and turns with the skill born of countless miles. A hawk circles overhead, its wings catching the last of the sunlight as it rides the evening thermals. Its cry is sharp and lonely, echoing across the hills before fading into the vast silence of the desert. You watch it for a moment, its grace a small gift in the midst of the day's grind. The air smells cleaner now, the heat of the day giving way to the crispness of early evening, though the dust still lingers, coating your skin and clothes in a fine layer that never seems to wash away completely. The first signs of Millfield appear in the distance, a cluster of low buildings nestled in a shallow valley where a small creek provides enough water to sustain a frontier town. Smoke rises from chimneys, and you can see the faint glow of lamplight in windows, a promise of rest and relief after the long day's journey. The horses sense it too, their ears pricking forward, their pace quickening slightly despite their fatigue. You let them move faster, trusting their instinct to carry you the final miles. The road descends gently into the valley, the wheels rolling smoothly over packed earth that has been worn smooth by years of traffic. The air is cooler here, shaded by the hills and softened by the presence of water. You can smell the creek before you see it, a faint dampness in the air that cuts through the dust and dryness. The horses' hooves splash through a shallow crossing, the water cool against their legs, and you feel a small surge of relief at the sight of the town ahead. Millfield is a small place, just a handful of buildings centered around a main street that doubles as your stagecoach route. The station is at the far end, a sturdy adobe building with a corral and a barn where your team will spend the night. You guide the coach through the town, passing a saloon where laughter and the clink of glasses spill out into the evening air, a general store with barrels and crates stacked on its porch, and a small church with a wooden cross silhouetted against the fading light. You bring the coach to a stop in front of the station, the brake lever groaning as you ease it forward for the final time today. The horses stand quietly, their sides heaving, their coats dark with sweat and dust. You climb down from the driver's box, your legs stiff and heavy, the ground feeling almost too solid under your boots. The air is cool now, a welcome change after the day's heat, and you take a deep breath, savoring the freshness that carries the scent of hay and water from the nearby creek. The station keeper, a wiry man named Tom with a face lined by years of sun and wind, steps out to greet you. He nods silently, understanding the exhaustion that comes with a full day's drive, and begins helping you unhitch the horses. You work together in quiet efficiency, unbuckling straps and leading the animals to the corral, where fresh water and feed await. Thunder shakes his head as you remove his harness, snorting softly as if to thank you for the relief. Molly and the others follow, their steps slow but steady as they move toward the trough. The passengers climb out of the coach, their movements stiff and sluggish, their faces marked by the strain of the journey. The businessman gathers his excessive luggage, muttering about the need for a proper bed and a decent meal. The young woman adjusts her bonnet and looks around the small town, her expression a mix of relief and uncertainty. The journalist tucks his notebook away and offers you a nod, perhaps in acknowledgement of the skill it took to get them here safely. They disappear into the station, where they'll find food and rest, their part in this day's journey complete. You and Tom lead the horses into the barn, where you brush them down with slow, careful strokes, removing the dust and sweat that have accumulated on their coats. The barn smells of hay and leather, a comforting mix that signals the end of the day's work. You check each horse for injuries, running your hands along their legs and hooves, feeling for heat or swelling. Thunder's loose shoe is still holding, but you'll need to have it reset tomorrow. Belle's cut is healing well, no sign of infection, and the others seem sound despite the day's demands. With the horses settled, you turn your attention to the coach. You check the wheels and axles one final time, noting the wear on the right front wheel and the thinning brake shoes. The throw braces need tightening, but that can wait until morning. You secure the toolbox and the mail compartment, the key still hanging safely around your neck. The coach is parked under a lean-to, protected from the night's dew, its faded paint catching the last light of the day. Tom offers you a plate of food, beans, cornbread, and a slice of dried beef, simple but filling. You sit on the station's porch, the wooden chair creaking under your weight, and eat slowly, letting the food settle your empty stomach. The air is cool now, the stars beginning to appear in the deepening purple sky. The town is quiet, the only sounds the distant murmur of voices from the saloon and the soft gurgle of the creek nearby. You can feel the day's fatigue settling over you like a heavy blanket, your eyelids growing heavy as you finish the meal. You take a moment to write a few notes in the small logbook you carry, recording the day's mileage, the condition of the horses, and the state of the coach. The pencil feels awkward in your tired hands, the words simple and functional, but the act of writing helps ground you, marking the end of one journey and the preparation for the next. You tuck the logbook into your pocket and stand, your joints protesting as you move toward the small room where you'll sleep. The bunk is narrow and hard, the mattress thin and lumpy, but it feels like a luxury after the day's rigors. You pull off your boots, wincing at the pinch in your heel where the right one has rubbed all day. Your clothes are stiff with dust and sweat, but you drape them over a chair, too tired to care about their condition. The room smells of wood and earth, the air cool and still. You lie down, the bunk creaking under your weight, and pull a thin blanket over your shoulders. The sounds of the town fade into the background, the soft clink of glasses, the distant lowing of cattle, the rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. Your body aches, every muscle and joint reminding you of the day's labor, but the exhaustion is a familiar companion, a sign of work well done. You close your eyes, letting the darkness wrap around you, the quiet rhythm of your breathing blending with the night's silence. The road waits for tomorrow, but for now, you drift into sleep, the world fading away as the stars shine above the endless desert.